Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had such a great time in Omaha last week. We're in Omaha, Nebraska. Then we went over to Topeka, Kansas, and then finished up in Dodge City, Kansas. Such hungry people, man, getting into the coming of the Lord. It's so blatant how close we are, so the churches are so excited. So we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war, because the rapture is signless, but the second coming has tons of signs. So we look at kind of what's going to happen just after the rapture. So, man, what a busy week with stuff going on around Israel. Why? People say, why would you want to know about the coming of the Lord? I hear people say that. What's the need? Well, when you see the finish line, you run faster. This is not an escape theology. This is an acceleration theology. Also, tell a quarterback in the last couple minutes of the game not to look at the play clock. No, the plays are more crucial. You have to know how the clock's winding down. And it's blatant right now how we can look at certain things and tell how close we are to the coming of the Lord. The signs are precise. They're exact. They're inarguable. The precision of it is absolutely amazing. So we're blessed and privileged to have the technology to look at it, because Jesus is just about to come back. I mean, things are just really going bizarre, crazy how close we are. So let's get into what happened around Israel. And before that, why do this? Jesus rebuked the crowd because they didn't know their hour of their visitation. He said, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of your visitation. So he wanted them to know. So we're getting into this stuff so that we know exactly where we are at the end of the church age. So let's pick up what's happened around Israel. Man, Israel did another airstrike in southeastern Syria, took out some Iranian convoys, and just as we're getting ready to tape right now, Syria sounded an alarm. There's another Israeli airstrike. Israel's literally having to stop convoys almost every week, sometimes two times a week, as Iran is sending down missiles to come into Syria to get over to Lebanon so they can fire at Israel. There is absolutely such a setup to attack Israel right now. It's amazing. In the midst of that, you've got Iran doing all kinds of other stuff. You have Iranian troops firing rockets at our bases in Iraq. In the middle of that, you've got Turkey firing at the Kurds in Iraq. You've got Turkey in another nation. It's so crazy with Turkey what they've done the last few weeks. Not just Russia bringing Soviet MiG-29s into Syria and bringing Soviet MiG-29s into Libya. You've got Turkey in Libya. Again, we talked about that last week a little bit, but really what happened this week was all the reports that came out from the Middle East said that Turkey and Egypt are about to get into a war. So about Libya. So, man, there's so much going on in the southern part of Israel, northern part of Israel with Hezbollah, literally ramping up things so that then they can attack. When the verbiage is they're getting ready to attack Israel, it's so crazy. So so much more keeps going on. This one's kind of interesting before we get into there's some crazy stuff that happens. We'll get there in a minute, but you had the International Atomic Energy Agency kind of condemn Iran because they tried to have access to a couple of sites this last week on Friday. Come to find out, there's a couple of sites that Iran has that have been radically enriching uranium the whole time since 2004 and 2005, have not even been remotely subject to the agreements that they'd made with the rest of the world. And while that was all happening, America kept trying to put sanctions on them, and they were circumventing them. You at least have Germany and have France and have England freaked out about this because, man, Iran is ready to have a nuclear weapon. So I'm so watching Israel every day, because eventually they're going to have to preemptively strike Iran, because Iran's just bent on attacking Israel. They believe it brings their Messiah in when they do that. And obviously they believe it'll come out of Istanbul, but it's just interesting to see the setup for all this right now. In the midst of this, you had the eclipse at the Ring of Fire this last weekend. In conjunction with that, you had Satanist priests in Jerusalem talking about worshiping Satan. Satan is love, Lucifer's life, how they're ready to bring the Antichrist on the scene. How crazy. They canceled their event right at the last minute, but you got all this crazy stuff happening with the signs in the heavens. And then you have earthquake after earthquake after earthquake. There were so many this last week, I can't even name the nations. One that comes to mind, though, which was pretty wild, right after President Trump's rally in Tulsa, there was an earthquake in Tulsa. So you have a lot of things happening that are pointing to the coming of the Lord. Specifically, the pressure on Israel about the annexation of Judea and Samaria. Now, the amazing thing about that is they call it annexing Judea and Samaria. No, they won that land back in the 1967 war. If people don't want them to have that land, they shouldn't have surrounded Israel and tried to annihilate Israel. So there's so many things happening on that front with the EU bringing condemnation to Israel. Well, so much goes behind the scenes with Benjamin Netanyahu, Benjamin Gantz. There's all this war going on about what's going to happen with all this. So it's pretty intriguing to see what's happening. You got India and China firing shots at each other. Different news agencies said this is the Battle of Armageddon. No. This is they say so, Gog and Magog. Remember, Gog and Magog war is Russia and Turkey right after the rapture of the church. That's that war. Armageddon 7 years later. That's when the kings of the east, a 200 million man army, come over the Euphrates River. So all these things are being set up for us right in front of our eyes, specifically this stuff with Iran and Israel. I keep looking every morning to see that Damascus is removed from being a city, because Israel had to hit right outside of Damascus again. So like 3 or 4 locations that they're taking out these targets with Iranian troops. No mention even all in the news about the 53,000 Iranian troops that are in Syrian uniforms on the southern part of Syria. So, man, things are about to bust loose. So we're watching the setup for the coming of the Lord. It's so many details, it's hard to even get them out as quick as I can. But let's always go to the Scripture. We look at the verses that show us the signs. Always go to the Word. Number 1, Jesus said the generation that sees Israel made a nation and Jerusalem won back. This is in Luke 21. He said that generation won't pass away till all is fulfilled. So those 2 things happened, remarkable in our lifetime. How cool is that? But you've got more. You've got the Hebrew language restored. You've got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You've got the fertility of the land of Israel. You have the revival of the Roman Empire. Just amazing to see things that you can tangibly look at. So you have that. I like the fertility of the land of Israel. So preaches, Then you have the Temple Mount Institute. They're ready to have sacrifices. Kind of wild. They had a makeshift sacrifice this last year. They put in an altar in a truck, came right up to the Temple Mount, and had the sacrifice right there on the edge of the Temple Mount. The Sanhedrin met with the Benjamin Netanyahu and said, can we please use the Temple Mount for sacrifices? So much more has been happening in the last 2 weeks about the Temple Mount, but all these things are happening because Jesus is about to come back. So you had a fish show up in the Dead Sea. Ezekiel prophesied that 2,500 years ago. Happened this last year in 2019. You had the ritual baths around the Temple Mount fill up with water, first time in 2,000 years. You had foxes on the Temple Mount. That's Lamentations 5:18. So you have all these tangible things to look at to show us how close we are. So the Lord's about to come back. So why would we talk about signs? Well, the Lord gave us signs just like when you're on the freeway. If you're going from Oklahoma City to Tulsa, it's about 90 miles. The signs tell you where you are on the freeway. But you've gone from not just signs of the coming of the Lord, we've got radical signals. You had blood red moons a few years ago on Passover and Tabernacles, 4 in a row. NASA called it a tetrad. When's the last time you had 4 in a row on Passover and Tabernacles? 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel was made a nation. 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So, I mean, you've got all this stuff happening that are signaling to us that the king is about to come back. Now, of course, the Bethlehem star this last year, pretty radical to have that first time in 2,000 years. Then Mercury did a flyby of the sun. First time, it happens about 5 times a century, but it went down directly over the Temple Mount at sundown. Planets formed a sickle, the moon formed a sickle, Orion changed its instrument to hammer. You had hammer and sickle rush a symbol on the same day. So all of these tangible physical things showing us that the king's coming back. What do we do as a church? As believers, we help our local church. We're more engaged with all this happening with coronavirus that's pushing people not to be engaged. We need to be more engaged because Jesus is about to come back. Help your local church, help your local pastor. The coronavirus, we know, is birth pains, contractions, Jesus said in Matthew 24. So I believe we're going to have many, many more things leading up to the rapture of the church and leading up to the second coming of the Lord. So we're watching all of the players for the Ezekiel 38 war literally fall in place right in front of our eyes. So it's exciting. For the world, it's very scary, but for the church, it's the most exciting time ever. When you see the finish line in a race, you get that kick, you get that push, because there's the finish line. My friend, we can see the finish line. We're about to go from faith to sight. We're about to see Jesus face to face. Amazing to all of a sudden be caught up, to be raptured. So aren't we blessed? Well, remember this. Have your walk with the King more intensified the closer you get. Be a friend of the Lord in the earth. Be Jesus' hands in the earth. Let him use your body. Let him look through your eyes. You're the only Jesus some people ever see. This is the season for him to be made manifest in the church. Every facet of the King through you. Hey, thanks for watching this week. We'll come back next week. So much is going on. We'll try our best to try to get it out without screaming it and without shotgunning it. But we're so blessed to be living right before he comes. Have an awesome week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the EDU at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.